Warning, this video is extremely, excessively long. There are timestamps in the description. Please, please God, don't watch this in one sitting like a psychopath. Watch it in chunks. Oh, okay. New merch, check it out. So this is probably the third time that I've had to record this. This is the same hoodie, but a different day, about a week after I've recorded the rest of the script for this video. And I decided to settle for something much shorter and sweeter for the intro. The game that I'm talking about today is Tormented Souls. It is a Resident Evil Silent Hill 1 wannabe. It's a clone. And I want to get something out of the way. Normally when I try to review games, I do my best to maintain neutrality and also keep in mind things like developer size, budget, studio size, how much it's going to cost you if you want to play it. This game is not particularly sinful in any of those categories. I am unreasonably upset by how bad I think this game is. And I think that it's less that this is like one of the worst games ever or anything like that, and more that this is such a waste of an opportunity for something really awesome to exist, that I'm very disappointed in all of the faults that it does have. One of the things that I've maintained is very important to being well-rounded as a streamer and just in general when you're talking about reviewing games and something like that, is playing something that's genuinely awful every now and again. I did Deadly Premonition for 10 hours. For my 1 year on Twitch, I played the entirety of Balan Wonderworld. I don't. Oh, hidden statue, you say? Hidden from what? Not me. Fuck this level. And while I don't think that this is necessarily as punishing to play as those games, I do think it lands itself on a list with those games. This is going to be a bit of a longer video than my normal reviews because now that I am going at this game so hard, knowing that it's kind of unjustified based on the price and the studio size, I fully recognize that. But there's going to be chapters in the description, so if you really want to get to the meat and potatoes, the story is the true criminal in this game. That being said, I'm not absolutely sure, and this is not a real review about one of the most disappointing things I'm going to play in 2022. Now, before we get into the overwhelming garbage that pops up even in the first few minutes of the game, I want to share with you an anecdote. About 20 minutes into the game, I was playing it for fun and planning on making a fun video to cover the game, and I made a joke. Having recently played and 100%ed Elden Ring, I was very familiar with the term, door does not open from this side. I encountered a locked door, and I made the following joke. It's fucking Elden Ring all over again. God damn it. Okay, I've got it. Spin around in a circle 3 times and abracadabra. Fuck. Innocent joke, right? See, the problem with this joke is that about an hour later, there's a puzzle where the actual solution to the puzzle is to turn off the lights and spin in a circle 3 times. That is the real solution to a real puzzle. The hint is so obscure that I would hazard the guess that most players end up having to look up what to do here. Please, by all means, correct me if I'm wrong, but I cannot for the life of me think of any puzzle in even the most frustrating of puzzle games where, without prompting, without markings on the ground, the solution to the puzzle is to fucking walk in circles and pray. In its defense, the game does tell you to pay close attention to the guy walking in circles around the gurney. Hi, editing Jake here. Scratch what I just said. It doesn't actually tell you to pay close attention. It doesn't say anything. If anything, the game actually uses this point in the game to show you through dialogue with the priest that you are the only one seeing the monsters. By making it a plot point, I actually think this furthers my point, which is that most players are going to forget it because the dude walking in the circle was there to demonstrate that you're the only one seeing monsters, not as a hint to a puzzle. Anyways, back to the video. In its defense, the game does tell you to pay close attention to the guy walking in circles around the gurney in what you could eventually assume is an alternate world version of the real operating room that's just down the hall. Now, there's probably two things on your mind right now. One, you might be thinking, well, this puzzle doesn't seem that bad. Two, you might also be thinking, alternate world, other timeline, time travel? Yeah, there's time travel in this game, and it's explained about as much as I'm gonna explain it right now, which is not at all. We'll cover all that garbage later on in the video during the story section. So is the puzzle easy? Normally I would fold and say, okay, maybe it's not that bad. But I think this warrants saying why I hate puzzles in video games so much. They annoy me because more often than not, the puzzles in video games tend to be more guess what I'm thinking solutions rather than logical solutions. Let me explain what I mean. When you play a game specifically made to be a puzzler, like The Witness, for example, you enter that frame of mind where you look at everything logically. How can this fit here? How does this rule that applied to the last puzzle apply here? The problem with most games where puzzles are in any way supplementary to the main game is that more often than not, there are leaps in the player's train of thought that have to be made in order to solve the puzzle.
So the first stage of Hello Neighbor is that you need to climb some shelves that don't look like you need to climb them. Make a 2 stack of boxes with its fucking janky ass carrying system. Then jump onto another roof with a jump that you can easily over. There's no fucking way this is what you're meant to do. There's no fucking way.
I'm not insinuating that when people play games, you can't multitask. But I can, in fact, tell you that the odd guy walking in circles in that room down the hallway is gone from my mind the very second I walk out into the hallway and have to go Rambo on a dude with knives for legs. Now, when I tell you that there's a guy walking around a gurney and that it's the solution to a puzzle in a room down the hall, it probably seems pretty easy because I just told you the solution and the hint accompanying it together. The reason this is such an awful puzzle is because along with some of the other bullshit in this game, in order to solve it, you have to make an illogical decision. Do you vaguely remember that guy doing donuts around the dead dude in the other room? Turn off the lights, spin around in a circle 3 times and say abracadabra. The reason that I made that joke earlier is because it would be absurd that the actual way to progress and do any necessary action in a game to progress would be to spin in a circle 3 times and pray. Yet, here we are. There are an abundance of dumb puzzles in this game, most of which involve using items in illogical ways. One of these puzzles is right at the start. You are tasked with starting a generator, and you are told that it has to be at 10 amps on the gauge. So you fiddle with the knobs on the wall until it matches 10, start the generator, and it doesn't start. Now, if you pay close attention to the animation on the screen, pause the video and tell me what I've done wrong here. The document explicitly states that 10 is the correct spot for this gauge to be in. 10 is the right answer here. Pause the video, go guess in the comments. Got it? Okay. The thing I did wrong here was not notice that the sputtering needle, that little sputter animation where it kind of jumps to life before it actually tries to start, that is actually counting towards the starting number for the puzzle. Technically, I'm starting at 9, not 10, because when the needle sputters, it drops down, and that's what's considered your actual starting point. As far as the game is concerned, the real solution is to start the needle at 11, so it sputters down to 10, and then the generator starts. This is what I mean when I'm talking about guess what I'm thinking solutions. You have to abandon logic in order to win, which is the hallmark of a shit puzzle. For one puzzle later on, you have to use the stethoscope on a statue and listen to its heartbeat. Then you have to go to a door and match the knocks you put on the door to the heartbeat you heard in the statue. Even if you get the rhythm right sometimes, it is extremely specific about it, and it took me like 10 tries knowing the answer in order to get the door to accept that I had done it properly. At another point in the game, I came across this hatch that was tied shut with a rope, and I had scissors in my inventory. Now, logically, you would think maybe I could use the scissors to cut the rope. You might think that. The game won't let you use the scissors, and you have to come back hours later with a knife instead. I understand that the game doesn't want me to go down where that hatch leads yet, but don't give me fucking scissors that are meant to cut something and have me walk by the hatch tied shut with a rope then. I want to make very clear that while I am heavily and purposefully shitting on the puzzle design in this game, that does not excuse Resident Evil and Silent Hill from having shitty puzzle design too. Those games absolutely suffer from some of the same issues that this one has. However, Tormented Souls does not have positives that outweigh the negatives like those two games do. This is going to be something that you're going to notice in pretty much all of my criticisms of this game. The developers chose largely to emulate rather than improve upon the formula that is those classic horror games, the Resident Evils, the Silent Hills. In a lot of cases, they chose the worst iterations of those features to include in this game, and it just adds up to a really unsatisfying, disappointing experience. How we approach a game can drastically change how we perceive it. Going in expecting something bad can lend itself to overcriticism. Meanwhile, going in expecting something to be great can lead to you justifying some very blatant and valid flaws. You might find yourself saying things like, you know, it's not that bad, because in your heart of hearts, you want the thing to succeed. This is the most important thing I'm going to say in this video. I wanted this game to succeed. I went out of my way to request a key for this game from the developer, which goes to show you just how much I hate this game. Because rather than just leaving a caution review on Steam and moving on with my life, I found it worthy of making a full video review talking about how disappointing and inadequate this game really is. The visual style is intriguing, the sound design is frequently fantastic, and the gameplay, which we're going to talk about now, isn't actually all that bad. More importantly than any of that though, the story of this game, which you are forced to engage with, is atrocious. When I finished this game, I was so frustrated with how the story was that I rage wrote 11 pages, single-spaced, of notes on plot holes, story-breaking, game-breaking plot holes. I will not be torturing you with all of those, just most of them. I'm actually not going to shit on the gameplay here too much. It is what you would expect from a game declaring in its promotional material that it wants to be Resident Evil and Silent Hill. Tank controls are tank controls. They are still annoying and a frustrating way to control your character. However, they do come with the bonus of being able to have scripted camera angles. I will say that I don't think this game took advantage of those scripted camera angles nearly as much as it should have. As a matter of fact, in writing this and even up to now that I'm recording this, I cannot think of a single instance that stands out in my mind where they use the camera angles to their advantage to do something interesting. If you're gonna make me deal with your annoying ass control scheme, at least show me some Silent Hill type shit to make up for it. I even went back recently and played Resident Evil 1 in preparation for this video, and almost immediately I was finding creative uses of the camera angles in that game. Is there a zombie around here? I feel like there is. There is! Oh, and you can see him in the mirror. That's so cool. That's so cool. Look at that. That is, oh my God, this game came out in 1999 and that's fucking cool. They were using these scripted camera angles to convey information to the player, to show you something interesting, to show you dangers ahead of you that you would not be able to see because you cannot control where the camera is looking. Tormented Souls feels less like an homage to those classics and more like a cheap ripoff in comparison. The UI in this game is problematic. Reloading your weapons from your inventory is the safer option, just like in the old Resident Evil games. But it feels extremely clunky to use anything in your inventory. In Resident Evil, you snap from option to option in the menus. But in Tormented Souls, when you open the menu, a cursor pops up that acts like a mouse you use with the analog stick. It is slower, inaccurate, and frustrating to use. Now, I played this game on controller, and I think it probably would have felt smoother to use a mouse and keyboard for the menuing, but I would not give up using the D-pad for tank controls just for menus to be easier for me. As far as combat goes, the only real issue I have with it is that recovery animations for everything that you do take way too long. The only example I feel obligated to show is the dodge, which is a new addition to this game. It is a minor step backwards that doesn't really get you all that far back, and the recovery before you can swing or shoot or dodge again is so long that the enemy is already right up between your ass cheeks. I quite often found myself doing a donut and running away rather than using the dodge button. It felt far more consistent and far safer than using the dodge. It's also worth mentioning that when choosing to emulate the Resident Evil or the Silent Hill style of combat, Tormented Souls chose to emulate Resident Evil. It doesn't sound like a lot when I say it out loud, but having that little bit of functionality to move when you have a gun aimed or when you have a melee weapon readied makes a world of difference in order to make you capable to line up a shot or dodge just far back enough so that you can get out of the range of a hit and then shoot and retaliate. In Tormented Souls, you do the same thing as in Resident Evil, which is where if you ready a weapon, being it a gun or a melee weapon, the second that you ready that up, you enter turret mode and you cannot move at all aside from adjusting where you're aiming. Now, I'm not going to call this feature ripping off because obviously this game is meant to be an homage to Resident Evil and Silent Hill. However, this is one of the worst imitations of a mechanic I have ever seen in a video game. There's this enemy that pops up about halfway through the game that follows you through multiple rooms and cannot be killed. Does it sound a little bit like Nemesis? The only thing that makes it different is that it looks like a fucking Scooby-Doo character when you dodge it, which is absurdly easy. There's also the little oopsie of this eternal enemy doing even less damage than the normal enemies do. There is little to no reason to be scared of it, and it is an absolute failure of a game mechanic. I should also mention that if you just don't want to deal with dodging it at all, if you hear the music that it's in the room when you enter a room, turn around, walk out, and then walk back into the room. It despawns the fucking enemy entirely. On the topic of ripping stuff straight out of the games it's trying to emulate, the mansion in Tormented Souls is almost a one-to-one of Resident Evil. I mean, the fucking main hall is quite literally a carbon copy of the main hall in Resident Evil. My final critique of the gameplay before we get to the story, which is the real atrocity in Tormented Souls, and I think is going to take up the majority of this video, is the save system. I saw a community post to the Tormented Souls Steam page where an older gamer was complaining that the save system in-game made it so that this was a game he had to play sparingly because he had kids and couldn't wait to find the tapes, which are this game's version of ink ribbons, and the save points so that he could put the game down. There was a lot of gnarly jackasses in the comment sections, but to their point, he did purchase a game that says in its promotional material it wants to be Resident Evil and Silent Hill. So save systems that accompany those games should have been expected when he bought the game. On the flip side, I tend to side with newer being better in almost every case when it comes to gaming. When it comes to the ink ribbon save system though, I actually don't hate it. If you expect it going in, it can add a nice layer of anxiety to your playthrough. How much can I do before I have to save again and waste another ink ribbon? This was most definitely a design choice in the original games and not a hardware limitation. And I can say it's actually pretty effective. A lot of what RE1 stumbled on was on accident, despite what popular opinion might make you think. But a lot of it was because the devs took a good bit of time to plan out what the game was going to consist of. Part of that in Resident Evil 1 is rationing the ink ribbons. When it comes to Tormented Souls, I fucking hate the ink ribbon system. In Resident Evil 1, even saving sparingly because I was worried I was going to run out of ink ribbons, I only had 2 or 3 left when I finished my first run. At the end of Tormented Souls, after playing the complete opposite way, saving pretty much every time I walked through a save room, I had 10 fucking ink ribbons left when I beat the game. 10 fucking ink ribbons. The whole point of the system is to cause anxiety about a redo and having to restart and go through sections that you've already played, which, by the way, is even more of a punishment in this game because it means you have to play it for longer. If you just give the player a million fucking tapes to save with, what's the point? As far as this game is concerned, that guy from the community post was right. If you are not going to tailor the experience of saving and checkpoints around having a limited number of tapes, why fucking bother? There's a lot of other little stuff, like when you open the map, it doesn't open to the floor that you're on, and you have to scroll through the tabs to find where you are. I mean, the achievements don't even work on Steam, and I'm not the only person with this problem. And just yesterday, a day before I'm recording this, after I think almost 2 months of people posting about it, the developer finally responded to the thread where people were complaining about achievements not working. So I guess that'll be fixed eventually. Editing Jake here yet again with another update. The developer did, I think, fix the achievements, but I can't check because when he updated the game to fix the achievements, it deleted my save. So that's cool. I think we spent enough time talking about the gameplay. Now it is time for the behemoth, the elephant in the room, the fat kid at the candy factory that is impossible to ignore. It is time to talk about the story of Tormented Souls. The first and most important thing to note is that the majority of the story in actual exposition in Tormented Souls comes from these journal entries. There are even achievements that don't unlock for fully finding all of the pages for each of the characters' journals. Now, I'm not going to actually fault the devs for this because it's a smaller budget game. There's only 3 voice actors, and when it goes through the credits, there's about 10 names, and half of the people in those credits share the same last name as the guy who created the game. I imagine this was a budget constraint choice rather than an active choice to make me suffer, although both motives end the same way, with me in pain. Tormented, if you will. Normally I'd give my spiel about how if I wanted to read a book, I'd read a goddamn book, and if you're taking me away from the game to read your shitty journal entries, you're failing at storytelling entirely. But again, budget. The reason that I'm faulting the developer for these is because these entries contain massive revelations about the story and the characters that you meet, and they're written like shitty drafts from shitty writing prompts.
Awful.
If I wanted to experience some of the worst writing known to mankind, I would give up my degree, go back to college, and sit in creative writing workshops again. I'm usually joking when I mention this, but I feel it lends me a bit of credibility in this situation. College degrees are bullshit, and they mean nothing about capability. I mean, fuck, the guy that wrote this story probably has a degree, but I have a degree in creative writing. I quite literally have a degree on the subject, and I feel well-grounded and confident in saying this story is awful. Every single one of these journal entries is really poorly written. All of the characters in them are characters that I imagine you would have met in the time travel sequences if there was a bigger budget for this game. I'm kind of glad we didn't meet them though, because they are the densest motherfuckers known to mankind. They are all missing brain cells and have the Kingdom Hearts method of reacting, which is to not realize anything until it is too late or almost too late to use that information. And the main character suffers from this too, but that's another issue all on its own. There's one point in the game where you time travel for the 3rd time. I honestly don't remember which time it is. But after all that time, she finally goes, maybe I'm in the past. I had to pause the game and tab out to see how long I had been playing the game. And according to Steam, I was 7.8 hours out of my 9 hours that I spent in the game when she finally reacts to the time travel stuff. Almost completely done with the fucking video game, and now you want to react? A 6-year-old would be able to put this together. This game's target audience is older adults that experienced Silent Hill and Resident Evil as kids, and they're now fully grown adults. For fuck's sake, there are titties in the opening 5 minutes of the game. There's a full frontal. There is body horror and gore all over this game. If you're gonna be a scary game that is targeted at adults, at least have a story that matches that, and don't treat me like a fucking child. This is something minor, but I thought it was weird that in all the promotional material for the game, it mentions Winter Lake Hospital, the Winter Lake family. In-game, it is the Wildberger Hospital and family. This is a localization thing. The game was originally written in, I believe, Spanish and then translated to English, but who the fuck along the localization chain was like, you know, Winter Lake doesn't sound ominous enough. You know what scares me? Wildberger. In the opening letter of the game, the address on the letter even says that it is Wildburger Hospital located on Winter Lake. I'm nitpicking, but still, let's start at the beginning. You get a letter in the mail with a picture of the twins that looks so much like a child version of the character that it makes me want to scream. Now, our main character never suspects anything about her relation to the letter, but still decides that it's worth investigating the return address on the letter. You go to the hospital, you walk in the front door, and about 2 steps in, you get knocked out. You wake up naked and afraid with a tube down your throat and one of your eyes missing. Full frontal, fade to title, let the game begin. Now, I'm going to stop here and spoil something for you that I want you to carry with you as we go through the story. In the journals that you pick up in the game, it is mentioned that you have an almost uncanny resemblance to your mother. And by you, I mean the main character. Surprise, you're one of the twins. Who would have guessed it? The man that hits you over the head and throws you naked into the tub? Yeah, that's your dad. Your dad, whose first reaction to someone being in his hospital is to knock them out and experiment on them. And somehow he doesn't notice that this young woman looks suspiciously like his wife. How maybe, just maybe, the twin daughters that he's been searching for 14 years, maybe this young girl that looks exactly like his wife is one of those twin girls. Moving on. So you meet this guy downstairs, and rather than question why he's there or why he's totally unaffected by the monsters, you take a nail gun from him and go on your merry way.
My child, you are pale. What happened to you?
A person in a wheelchair with knives in his hands was chasing me.
Go to the end of the hall and through the door that leads to the generator room. It's dangerous to walk around the mansion unarmed.
You turn on the power and head to the library just like he told you to. At the library, after fighting your way through hordes of spiky people, you find this painting and you figure out that the twin girls are needed in order to awaken the devil and that there's some kind of surgery that will do the trick. As an aside, the surgery never happens. I think in one of the journals, it talks about them using a set of twins that they stole from the town to make the devil into an egg. And then they need another set of twins, which is you and your sister, to awaken the devil from the egg. The game doesn't even have an answer to this, so I'm not going to try and decipher it. Armed with this information, Caroline decides she's got to save the twins.
If I don't find them soon, something terrible might happen.
It is inexplicably important to her, just like it was inexplicably important for her to even show up at the hospital in the first place. Now, we know why. But 4 hours into the game at this point, the game still doesn't think that it's time to reveal to the player why this is important. You go through more enemies and puzzles and you wind up at a dining room where, you guessed it, it's Grandpa Priest, who is eating some fucking soup. How did he get here? Why is he eating soup in an abandoned fucking hospital?
What are you doing here?
I am eating some soup.
He points you to an operating room upstairs, and you go there, and guess who's already there? Because he's a teleporting cyborg.
Father, what's going on here? Why is that weird man walking around the operating table with that weird chandelier in his hands?
Let me tell you a story.
You get a knife from the dumb walk in circles puzzle, and Grandpa tells you to go to the basement. You find your way to a room that isn't marked, called the experiment room. And you get a tape with the date 1980 on it. It is important to mention that the game is set in 1994. At this point, you'll probably put 2 and 2 together and go to a room you found earlier in the game that had a projector in it with a tape player. You put the tape in, it plays the scene from 1980, and you touch the screen and enter the past. Time travel, baby. I think at this point, it's important to address something that occurred to me when writing out the script for this video. At what point can we consider the story elements in a game a parody rather than a pitfall, right? Is the game self-aware of how dumb the story is and having fun with it, or is it running headfirst forward with blinders on and taking itself all too seriously? In Resident Evil 8, Ethan saying dumb shit and having plot armor is a national pastime. The game is aware of how dumb the plot is and leans into it. It's serious, but we all know it isn't. It's an inside joke. It's funny. There can most definitely be something to be said for games that take their own absurdity completely seriously, because it can send you to this place where you're able to be taken along for this ride in this world of ridiculousness, and it doesn't feel out of place. That's not the case here, but I felt I should mention it because there are good games that do that. Not this one, but they exist. So you're in the past, time traveling. You find a little girl who will not be revealed as your little sister until hours later, even though she looks exactly like you. The little girl says that some mean men, along with her grandfather, took her and her mom and locked her in a cell while her dad was away on a business trip. This is actually a puzzle, and you're supposed to put some nitric acid on the chain on the door so that she can eventually get out. It will take days to do its job, which is actually one of the more clever things that it does with puzzles in this game. It's never used to great effect, but even later on, you go to the past and you're in the hospital and you leave a mold in a freezer so that you can come back in the future and there will be a key that was frozen in the mold. This is, of course, assuming that in 14 years, no one opened the freezer, but that's besides the point. You go to the present, and in the cell that the little girl was in, the door is now open because you used that nitric acid. There is a piece of a key in here that is the missing piece for some puzzles on a couple doors that you've been walking by in the game. The puzzles aren't egregious, but they are still kind of obscure and annoying. You find another tape and go to the past and meet Grandpa Priest, who says you have not met before. The church is also in amazing condition compared to what you found it in, and Caroline still doesn't know that she is in the past. You wander around in the present afterwards and find, you guessed it, the fucking priest again. He's sitting on the edge of a gurney and his arm got chopped off, and he literally won't say anything. No matter how many times you click on him, he does not speak.
Father, what happened to you? You're in shock. We need to take care of your injury before you bleed out. He's lost an arm. I must find a way to help him.
I don't know if this is a plot hole or not, but if he can't see the monsters, how the fuck did his arm get ripped off? If he can see them, then how the fuck is his old ass getting around the hospital safely? I mean, later on, it's implied that he's been wandering around the hospital waiting for either you to show up or for him to stumble on a solution to summon Satan for years. And in all this time, he hasn't been killed by the monsters? Anyways, you go through a series of small puzzles here where you go to the alternate reality through some mirrors, and you find a mannequin where the priest was sitting, and you attach a fake arm to him, magically healing the priest in the real world. In case you're getting confused, yes, there is both time travel and alternate realities in this game, and they are not connected whatsoever. Priest says, "Thank you for healing my arm," and gives you a clip-on flashlight, which lets you hold a weapon in the dark, which previously you couldn't do, and this allows you to open up some more parts of the game that were unavailable to you previously. This is where you meet the Scooby-Doo enemy that chases you through multiple rooms just before meeting the doctor. This is where we have to start talking major plot holes. The office that we're about to enter is the office of your father. You and your sister were born, and from the very moment you were born, Grandpa, who is the priest you've been running into all this time, has been eyeballing you two because he's a part of a cult that specifically needs twins in order to summon Satan. Now, Grandpa is your mother's father, except both sides of the family are involved in this weird cult. Your father is aware of this the entire time. It is shown that his wife, your mother, has whip scars on her back because your grandpa used to whip her when she misbehaved up until she was married. Full stop. I don't understand how you can include something as drastic as this and then ignore it. If any actual logic was used here, the second that your dad found out about this, Grandpa wouldn't be allowed near your wife, and especially later on down the line, your twin baby girls, who you are aware he has been eyeballing because he's the leader of a fucking cult that loves sacrificing twin girls. But the game just fucking ignores it. In the journal entries, Grandpa is just constantly around the wife and the girls. The only acknowledgement from the game is that your dad in one of his journal entries writes that, "Oh, I'll never let him hurt my wife or my daughters. Never." Okay, buddy. Now, also in the journal entries is the fact that when you got knocked out earlier, that was your dad, and he didn't notice you look exactly like your mom. We've already covered this. He also decided that you were perfect for his experiments because he couldn't wait any longer for any new people to show up for him to experiment on. Your mom has been comatose this entire time. She's alive, but she's been in a coma for 14 years. That your dad doesn't know that your grandpa inflicted on her. Dad needs to experiment with his antidote for her coma. So what does he do to you? He injects you with her blood, poisoning you, and then tests the antidote on you. The next part really drives home how fucking stupid this is. It works. He goes and cures his wife just for her to be alive long enough to tell him that her dad stole the twins and put her in a coma. She says this, and then she just dies. All of this information, by the way, is actually in a journal entry. It's not in any of the cutscenes. There is a much worse problem here, though. This revelation implies that in the 14 years since you've been missing, your grandpa, who is openly a leader of a cult that loves sacrificing twin girls and is also extremely, extremely abusive to your mother, has been running around the hospital. In the 14 years that you were gone, at no point did your father think, you know, maybe that guy that's really abusive and likes sacrificing twin girls to Satan, maybe he knocked my wife out forever and stole my twin girls. Grandpa is fucking running around his hospital all the goddamn time like a crack addict, and at no point does he think to stop him. Also, we are well aware of how in tune your dad is with who goes in and out of his hospital, because you made it all of 2 steps before he fucking knocked you out at the start of the game. So that means Grandpa has been scooting around the hospital this whole time, just completely unobstructed, and you get what I'm getting at here? I hate coincidences in stories. It's lazy writing almost all of the time, but this goes so far beyond coincidence that it's painful to experience. It requires a mind-numbing level of blindness to plot details to even remotely accept that any of this is plausible. And again, like I said earlier, this game takes itself 100% seriously. This isn't parody, it's just shit.
What the fuck?
Now, last we left off, we were in your dad's office, and you find a journal entry where he details knocking you out, testing you, and his wife revealing that Grandpa is the one behind everything. The last pages talk about how your dad is gonna fucking murder Grandpa. He can't believe he's done this, and he's gonna fucking torture him. And then the last lines are so comically bad that I'm going to directly quote them for you. "The unspeakable things I will do to you have no name, Noah. Once you tell me what you did to my girls, you will beg me to take your life." This is odd. I don't feel well at all. My heartbeat has accelerated. My mouth is dry. My eyes are cloudy. My throat is tight.
His vomit on his sweater already. Mom's spaghetti.
Someone has poisoned my wine. And then it trails off in ink on the last little line there because he dies. Grandpa poisoned your dad. The chair spins around and it reveals your dad, who is remarkably young looking for some reason. In his villain monologue later, Grandpa says that he murdered your dad because after he created the antidote, there was no more use for him, except for the fact that Grandpa never needed the antidote or anything. Who fucking knows? Also, side note, you pass through your office like 100 times before the game is over, and after you find your dad's dead body, it just disappears. It's just not there anymore. It's never explained. No one did anything to it. It's just gone. So there's the safe we're going to find in about 20 in-game minutes. The big bad safe that holds all the keys to summoning Satan. And this is the point in the story where it explains your missing eye. See, this giant underground safe in the sewers that is underwater has 2 biometric eye scanners on it. And the only thing that it will open this is if it scans the eyes of twins that have some kind of special blood or some shit. When I lowered the water level to this door, I never walked down there. I figured we were going to find like a lever or a button or something, and I was still exploring, so I never actually went down to the door. So I never got any dialogue or a cutscene or anything that would show me that there were biometric scanners on the door. It just looks like a fucking safe door. That means that I was never told that you would need an eye in order to open the door. So I went through this entire next sequence not knowing there was an eye scanner on that door. But even if I did know that, it doesn't excuse what happens. See, you go to the past in order to open up the doors to the sewer, you cut out your own fucking eye. Yep. Plan A is to cut out your own fucking eye with a scalpel. There was no forced cutscene with the door, so to my knowledge at this point, you were just cutting your eye out for the fun of it. Even if you do know that going in though, is this really the best solution? You don't even know what's behind the fucking door. This is another small nitpick because there does have to be suspension of disbelief for some things in games to work, but also, how in the fuck do you manage to cut out your own eye, keeping it intact for the scanner without killing yourself? Do you know how hard surgery is? You went at it with a rusty scalpel you found tucked under a dead body, and you somehow managed to do it successfully. Moving on. At this point, all the enemies that had stayed dead on the ground before respawn throughout the mansion. I was so annoyed at this point that instead of fighting, I just started running by everything. You run through the hospital here and you end up having to deal with this room referred to as the infinite puzzle room, which is exactly as much fun as it sounds. And then you get down to the sewer, which is where the safe is that we were just talking about. Apparently, if you do walk down to it, there's a cutscene where Caroline tries to do the scanner on the door and it rejects her, furthering my point that cutting out your own eye is the dumbest fucking plot point. If it rejected one of your eyes, why is cutting out the other one gonna work? You go through a mirror here and somehow end up back at your room from the beginning of the game. You fiddle with the channels on a TV and there it is. Finally, Caroline realizes that she is one of the sisters.
Ugh, my head. What is this? I know this song. I know it. It's the song my sister and I used to listen to when we were children. My sister Anna. I am Emma, the girl who fell from the bridge 14 years ago. All this time, I've kept the traumatic memories hidden inside my head. But this song has set them free.
This is the part where I tabbed out and was 8 hours into a 9-hour game and she finally fucking realized it. Now that she has actual character motivation, Caroline goes to the past and chops out her eye with a scalpel because of fucking course she does. And you head down to the door. You use, and I wish I was making this up, fishing line and a fish hook to set up the eye to dangle in front of the eye scanner so that you can go to the other side and open the door. Grandpa shows up and calls you a fucking idiot for doing everything for him, which I think is pretty justified. And he says he's planned everything all along. This was all part of his scheme. Oh my God, big revelation. After all this time, he runs inside and finally he can summon Satan. He also leaves in the most spectacular fashion. Seriously, someone make a gif of this.
Hey, wait! Where do you think you're going?
So naturally, instead of shutting the impossible to open door that stayed shut for 14 years, locking your grandpa inside with Satan, Caroline goes down into the door. I do want to mention one gameplay note. At this point in the game, you start encountering these Hammer Bros, which are the final enemies in the game. They are meant to be the outfits of the cult members because the devil placenta gives off radiation or some shit. I don't know. The reason I'm mentioning these Hammer Bros is because they are so ridiculously telegraphed in their attacks that it's almost more difficult to get hit by them than it is to dodge them. They also do fuck all for damage. I didn't even fight them at this point. I just ran by them. Anyways, you get all the way to the bottom and you fix this industrial machine with a master lock.
Today, I'm going to show you 3 separate master lock products. It's that fast and easy, and once I have that in position, I press down on the shackle, down on the shim, and it pops open. And the 142.
The machine does its job and you enter the catacombs. Grandpa is there with that weird Scooby-Doo villain strapped to the wall, and guess what? That's your sister. Grandpa shuts the door at this point and leaves you to fight 4 of the Hammer Bros, which after you defeat them, a key literally falls out of the fucking ceiling. Another small, or well, large gameplay note here is that you don't have to finish the game here. After the key falls out of the ceiling, you go and pick it up and you have to interact with this little elevator that'll get you up to the door to follow your grandpa. Just like earlier where there should have been a forced cutscene to show me that there was biometric scanners on the door, there's no forced cutscene here either. After you pick up the key, you can run in circles for as long as you want. I did it for 5 minutes just to see, but there is no urgency here, and you can let Grandpa go do whatever he's doing with the devil in the other room and never actually follow him. There's a reason that there's a timer at the end of Resident Evil. You go up the elevator and have a big sad scene where you give your sister the antidote. If you remember, you have it. I think you can actually let her die here, but don't quote me on that. And then she falls down and dies human. She's also super blue and super naked. More importantly than your sister's death, there's a fucking bolt cutter next to her. That'll never be explained why that's there, but it is very story essential. Grandpa was kind enough to wait to slit his wrists and start the boss fight while I was in the other room spinning in circles. And then he just dies on the floor. So the final boss fight is Satan. And you might be thinking, well, how do I beat Satan? Well, Caroline snipes a giant drill conveniently above Satan's head with a fucking nail gun. It's worth mentioning here that Grandpa's dead body also does the same thing that your dad's dead body is, which is after it shows the cutscene where, you know, they're dead, they just disappear. It's never explained. He's just gone. Maybe it runs in the family. There is a magical elevator that brings you back up into a neutered version of the hospital where you do the only thing that makes sense. You go back in time with the bolt cutters, free your sister, and then bring her to the present. You walk out the front door with that key that dropped from the ceiling during the boss fight, and roll credits. Rather than doing an entire section dedicated to plot holes, I feel like I've done a pretty good job splitting them up throughout the explanation of the story. There's only one really, really big one that I want to cover that's left. How in the fuck did your grandpa find you, and why the hell did he send you a letter? You escaped from the hospital as a kid. You changed your name, you lost all memory of it, and you're far enough away that it takes you weeks to get to the hospital. If you and your eyes and your blood are so essential to summoning Satan, and Grandpa is such a devious and good schemer, if he knows where you fucking live, why not just come club you over the head and do it that way? The answer is that he doesn't do any of that because that would make sense, and then we wouldn't have a game. Ridiculous plot points are a hallmark of horror stories. Maybe I would be able to accept it if it was just a couple, but there's so much garbage in this story, and Tormented Souls really isn't up to the challenge of making it all work. The puzzles and the game that come attached to this really awful story are also not up to par. As a final note, I wondered why the title for this game was so ominous when this is such a Scooby-Doo-ass game, and I've come to this conclusion. The game isn't called Tormented Souls because it torments the characters. It's called Tormented Souls because it torments the poor fuckers that buy it. The only way to win this game is not to play it at all.